My parents said my trucker job would shame them in front of my sister's fiancé, so I exposed the truth, and what happened next shattered their image. I'm a 34-year-old male, a truck driver based outside of Pittsburgh. I've been doing long hauls for about 8 years now. It's not the glamorous life my family wanted for me, but it pays the bills, and I actually like the freedom of the open road. There's something about watching America roll by through your windshield, while everyone else is stuck in cubicles, that really puts life in perspective. The solitude of the highway, the random roadside diners with surprisingly good pie, the ever-changing landscapes from desert to mountains to plains, it's a life that suits me, even if no one else in my family gets it. I wasn't always on the road alone, though. For the past 5 years, I've had the best co-pilot a trucker could ask for, a rescue mutt named Diesel. I found him at a rest stop in Oklahoma, skinny and scared, hiding under a dumpster during a thunderstorm. He had no collar, no chip. I wrapped him in my spare jacket, shared my beef jerky, and by morning, we were inseparable. He's a medium-sized mix of who knows what, with one floppy ear and one pointy one. He's smart as hell, too, knows the difference between a loading dock and a waste station, and gets excited or annoyed accordingly. He's better company than most people I know. Growing up in my family was like being an extra in a movie where everyone else got the speaking parts. My older brother Liam, a 37-year-old male, is some fancy corporate lawyer in Philly with a corner office and designer suits. My younger sister Courtney, a 29-year-old female, works for a tech startup that just got a ton of investor money. Both are college-educated, both make 6 figures, and both are the absolute pride and joy of my parents. Liam's the type who mentions his alma mater in the first 5 minutes of conversation and wears those pretentious glasses that probably don't even have prescription lenses. Courtney's all about her personal brand and has one of those job titles that doesn't actually mean anything, like innovation catalyst or some nonsense. Every conversation at family gatherings would inevitably turn into the Liam and Courtney show. Liam just won another case. Courtney's company is being featured in some business magazine. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting there like I'm invisible, passing the mashed potatoes and wondering if anyone would notice if I just got up and left. They probably wouldn't. Then there's me, the middle child who never lived up to his potential. I dropped out of college after 2 years because I couldn't stand sitting in a classroom anymore. My dad never let me forget it. Your brother was top of his class at Penn State, and you couldn't even finish community college, he'd say. Thanks. Dad heard it the first 100 times my mom would always give me that look. You know, the one half pity, half disappointment, like I was some rescue dog that couldn't be house-trained. The truth is, I was always more hands-on. While Liam was memorizing legal precedents and Courtney was learning how to disrupt industries, I was the one who could take apart an engine and put it back together by 16. I was the one who fixed the roof after that big storm in 2008 when no contractors were available. I was the one who knew how to unclog a toilet without calling a plumber and spending $200. But somehow, these skills didn't count in my family's definition of success. Every family gathering was the same routine. Liam would talk about some big case he was working on. Courtney would brag about her latest promotion, and I'd sit there while my parents basically pretended I didn't exist. Unless they needed something fixed, of course. Then suddenly, I existed. Jimmy, the sink is leaking. Jimmy, can you look at Mom's car? Jimmy, we need you to help move this furniture. Funny how my failed career path never stopped them from asking for free labor, but heaven forbid they ask Liam to get his manicured hands dirty. Wouldn't want him to chip a nail while he's typing up those important legal briefs. And Courtney, too busy networking, also known as posting inspirational quotes on LinkedIn to help around the house. I remember one Thanksgiving when the furnace died right before dinner. While everyone else was panicking about the turkey getting cold, I was down in the basement with a flashlight between my teeth, fixing the damn thing. It took me 2 hours. When I came back up, sweaty and covered in dust, dinner was already over. They'd saved me a plate, cold turkey, and congealed gravy. Liam was telling some story about a celebrity client, and no one even acknowledged that I'd just saved them from having to call an emergency HVAC guy on a holiday, which would have cost at least $1,000. The worst part? I've been quietly paying their property taxes for the past 3 years, about $350 every quarter. Mom called me one day, crying about how they might lose the house because Dad's retirement wasn't covering everything. So I stepped up. No thanks required, apparently. I never asked for recognition, but a simple thank you now and then would have been nice. Instead, they kept acting like I was the family charity case. Poor Jimmy with his truck driving job. At least he's not on drugs, I guess. That was my mom's backhanded compliment to her bridge club friends that I overheard once. I wasn't always a truck driver. After dropping out of college, I tried a bunch of different jobs, worked construction for a while, did some time as a mechanic at my uncle's shop, even tried bartending. But nothing really fit until I got behind the wheel of a big rig. There's something about the responsibility of handling an 80,000-pound vehicle, the problem-solving of navigating through crazy weather and traffic, and yeah, the freedom of not having some boss breathing down my neck all day that just works for me. My real turning point came when I met Miguel at a truck stop outside of Memphis. He was this old-school trucker, probably in his 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a ponytail and arms covered in faded tattoos from his Navy days. I was struggling with my first rig, having blown a tire on Interstate 40 and barely made it to the truck stop. While I was fumbling with the jack, looking like a complete amateur, Miguel came over. "Need a hand, rookie?" he asked, already rolling up his sleeves. What was supposed to be a quick tire change turned into a 4-hour conversation that changed the course of my life. Miguel had been driving for over 30 years, knew every back road and shortcut across America, and had the kind of wisdom you can't get from a book. He showed me how to properly change that tire, then bought me a cup of coffee and proceeded to drop knowledge bombs about everything from the best routes to avoid waste stations to how to negotiate better rates with dispatchers. "This ain't just driving, kid," he told me, pointing to his temple. "It's up here, got to be smarter than the road." Miguel became my unofficial mentor. We'd meet up at truck stops when our routes crossed, and he introduced me to his network of trusted mechanics, dispatchers, and loading dock managers across the country. The kind of connections that make the difference between barely surviving and actually thriving in this business. He's the one who encouraged me to save up and buy my own rig instead of driving for a company. Best advice I ever took. 2 years ago, Miguel had a heart attack while driving through Arizona. He managed to pull his truck over safely before collapsing. By some miracle, I was at the same rest area, recognized his rig, and found him. I got him to a hospital in time. The doctor said if I'd found him even 20 minutes later, he wouldn't have made it. After he recovered, Miguel decided it was time to retire. He sold me his routes and client list for a fraction of what they were worth, saying he'd rather see them go to someone who cared than to some faceless corporation. That's how I went from a struggling driver to owning my own small but profitable operation. All because an old trucker took pity on a kid with a blown tire. For years, I just took it. I'd grit my teeth and nod along when Dad would talk about how real success requires education while staring pointedly at me. I'd smile when relatives would ask what I was still doing for work, like driving a truck was some temporary gig I'd been stuck in. I kept telling myself that they were family, and family sticks together no matter what. Boy, was I wrong about that. It all started when Courtney got engaged to this dude named Paul, an investment banker type with the personality of a stapler. But he drove a Tesla and had family money, so my parents were practically planning the royal wedding. I first heard about Paul at Christmas last year. Courtney wouldn't shut up about him and his promising career trajectory and how his family had a summer home in the Hamptons. I just nodded along. Paul was exactly what you'd expect. Tall, perfect teeth, hair that probably cost more to maintain than my truck payment. The kind of guy who refers to his prep school days as if they were his tour in Vietnam. The first time I met him, he asked what I did for a living. When I told him I was a truck driver, he actually said, "Oh, that's necessary, I suppose, like I was a sewage worker or something." Then he launched into this condescending explanation about how autonomous vehicles were going to make my job obsolete in 5 years. I just smiled and nodded, thinking about how this dude probably couldn't change a tire if his life depended on it. I was on the road in Nebraska when Courtney called to tell me about the engagement. The signal was spotty, but I could hear the excitement in her voice, and honestly, I was happy for her. We might not be close, but she's still my sister. She mentioned they were having a big engagement party at Mom and Dad's in 3 weeks. I checked my schedule. I'd have to rearrange some routes, maybe swap with another driver, but nothing impossible. She then suggested I dress up for the event since Paul's family would be there. The way she said it made it clear my usual flannel and jeans wouldn't cut it. I called Mom the next day to confirm I'd be coming and ask if they needed me to bring anything. Dad picked up instead. His voice always had this way of making me feel like I was 12 years old again and had just broken something valuable. What happened next still makes my blood boil when I think about it. Dad straight up told me it might be better if I skipped the party. When I asked why, he gave me some nonsense about Paul's family being well connected, his father on the board of 3 companies, his mother from old money. Apparently, my job wasn't something they could brag about, and I didn't fit in with these kinds of people. The conversation got worse from there. He suggested that if I insisted on coming, I should lie about my profession. Say I was in logistics management instead of being honest about driving trucks. Then he had the nerve to tell me not to share my truck stop stories because nobody wants to hear that, as if my life experiences were somehow embarrassing or shameful. Then he actually said it. If you come and embarrass this family in front of Paul's parents, don't bother calling me your father anymore. I hung up, didn't even respond, just hit end call and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat like it was on fire. The highway stretched out in front of me, endless and empty, just like I felt inside. Diesel jumped up from his dog bed behind my seat and came to rest his head on my lap, sensing my mood. Dogs always know. After that call, I pulled my rig into the next rest stop and just sat there, engine idling, trying to process what had just happened. My own father basically told me I was too embarrassing to attend my sister's engagement party, too embarrassing to even acknowledge what I actually did for a living. The rest stop was one of those in the middle of nowhere. I sat on a bench, sharing beef jerky with Diesel, surrounded by other drivers eating sandwiches and smoking cigarettes, all of us avoiding going back to our cabs for just a little longer. That's when I ran into Sarah, a fellow driver I'd met at a few truck stops over the years. She hauled primarily electronics from the West Coast to the Midwest, and we'd share meals occasionally when our routes overlapped. Sarah was sharp as a tack, a former software engineer who got tired of staring at screens and wanted to see the country. She made more money driving trucks than coding, which always made me laugh. I must have looked like hell because she sat down next to me without asking and handed me a coffee. "Spill it, Lancaster," she said, using my last name the way truckers do. "You look like someone ran over your dog." At that, Diesel raised his head and she scratched behind his ears. "No offense, buddy." I ended up telling her the whole story about my family, the engagement party, my dad's ultimatum. She listened without interrupting, just nodding occasionally and sipping her coffee. When I finished, she was quiet for a minute, just watching the sunset. Then she turned to me. "You know what I learned in my previous life coding? If the system's broken, sometimes you gotta crash it, force a reboot." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. She shrugged. "Just that maybe it's time your family learns what you're really worth to them. Sometimes people only appreciate what they had after it's gone." We talked for another hour, mostly about routes and weather forecasts and fuel prices, normal trucker stuff, but her words stuck with me as I got back on the road that night. Maybe it was time for a system crash. Then it hit me. All the money I'd been sending them for 3 years. I'd been covering their property taxes, never missed a payment, never complained, just quietly transferred the money every quarter, because family helps family or whatever nonsense my dad always preached when he needed something from me. I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app. I started adding it up, scrolling through the transaction history. $350 every 3 months for 3 years, plus that time I paid for the new water heater. $1,200. And the roof repair after that storm. $2,800. And Mom's dental work that insurance wouldn't cover. $1,700. Total. $13,500. $13,500 for my embarrassing truck driver salary. And now, I wasn't good enough to sit at a table with my own family. Not even good enough to say what I actually did for a living. As I scrolled through all those transactions, I wondered if Liam had ever pitched an cent. Probably not. Too busy buying designer suits and leasing luxury cars to keep up with his lawyer buddies. I bet they didn't even ask him. And Courtney? She was always investing in her future, which apparently meant spending every penny on herself. My whole life, I'd been the family punching bag, the joke, the cautionary tale they probably told their friends. Make sure your kids go to college or they'll end up like Jimmy. But I was also their wallet, their handyman, their emergency backup plan. Well, not anymore. I'm not usually the revenge type, more of a live and let live guy. I've seen too much on the road to get worked up about small stuff. But something in me snapped that day at the rest stop, like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long. I opened my banking app again and went to the scheduled payment section. I found the one labeled Mom and Dad property tax that was set to go out next week. $350. I canceled it. Then I did something else. I knew my parents had been struggling with their mortgage too. They had refinanced a couple of years back, and I remembered Mom mentioning the due date was always tight, with Dad's pension coming in on the 3rd. The engagement party was scheduled for the 5th. I texted my buddy Eric, who works at the electric company. We go way back. I helped him move 3 times and never asked for anything. He's one of the few people who never judged me for my career choice. I asked him when they typically shut off electricity for non-payment. He told me around the 5th or 6th if there'd been warnings. Perfect timing. For the next 2 weeks, I ignored all calls from my family. There weren't many, just one from Mom asking if I'd gotten the invitation, which I hadn't, and one from Courtney confirming I wasn't coming, which I didn't answer. Not a single call from my father. Not surprising. He probably thought he'd done me a favor by sparing me from an event where I would have been out of place. I kept driving my routes, hauling goods across the country, while this plan simmered in the back of my mind. There's a lot of time to think when you're driving for 10 hours straight with nothing but highway and radio for company. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my pride for the sake of family peace, all the times I'd shown up to help them move furniture or fix plumbing or jumpstart their cars, only to be treated like the family disappointment 5 minutes later. Along the way, I called Miguel and told him what was going down. He listened quietly, then burst out laughing. "Mejijo," he said, slipping into Spanish the way he did when he was really amused. That's some cold-blooded shit. But you know what? Sometimes the family needs to learn the hard way. Then he got serious. Just make sure this is what you really want. Revenge tastes sweet at first, but it can leave a bitter aftertaste. I thought about it for another 100 miles. Was this too far? Maybe. But so was telling your son he's too embarrassing to attend a family function. My buddy Marcus, who runs a small catering business, texted me about a week before the party. "Dude, just got hired for some fancy engagement party at your parents' place. Should I hook you up with some extra appetizers?" I laughed out loud in my empty truck cab and told him I wasn't invited because the family thought I was too embarrassing. He offered to spit in the food as a joke, but I just asked him to tell me how it goes. The day before the engagement party, I checked my bank account. The property tax payment would have gone out today, but it didn't. For the first time in 3 years, my parents would miss a payment, and if I knew my parents, they hadn't been keeping track of these payments themselves. They probably didn't even know they were due. Timing is everything. The day of Courtney's engagement party arrived. I was on a haul back from Chicago, deliberately taking my time. Around 5 o'clock in the evening, exactly when the party was supposed to start, according to the invitation I never received, my phone started blowing up. First text from Mom, "Jimmy, something's wrong with the electricity. It's gone out and we have a house full of guests. Can you call the company?" Second text from Dad, "The electric company said we're behind on payments. This is ridiculous. Fix this now." Third text from Courtney, "OMG, Jimmy, please help. Paul's parents are here, and we have no power. This is ruining everything." I didn't respond to any of them, just kept driving. Radio turned up loud, singing along to some old country song. I was about 2 hours from home, and I had no plans to rush. Diesel was snoring in his bed, oblivious to the chaos unfolding in my family. Lucky dog. An hour later, Marcus sent me a photo that was absolutely priceless. A bunch of well-dressed people standing around my parents' dark living room, lit only by the emergency lights and a few candles. Paul's parents looked super uncomfortable, his mom clutching her pearls, literally wearing pearls, and his dad checking his watch every 30 seconds. Courtney looked like she was about to cry, her makeup starting to run. Dad looked murderous, his face all red and blotchy the way it gets when he's really pissed. Mom was frantically lighting more candles, the food was getting warm, rich people were leaving, and Paul's dad had apparently asked if my parents often failed to pay their utilities. When Marcus mentioned to Paul's mom that he had catered an event for me last month, she seemed surprised I could afford catering. Marcus told her I owned my own transportation business, which was technically true. I do own my rig. Dude. Marcus texted later she asked so many questions about you after that, like she couldn't believe the truck driver was doing better than the lawyer and tech girl. I may have embellished a bit and said you had a fleet. Hope that's cool. I snorted. A fleet? Me and Diesel and 18 wheels. But I appreciated the backup. Another hour passed. My phone kept lighting up with increasingly desperate messages. Liam, whatever you're doing, stop it. Mom's in tears. Dad, this isn't funny, Jimmy. You'll regret this. Mom, please, sweetheart. If this is about what your father said, we can talk about it later. Just help us now. Courtney, I hate you. You've ruined the most important day of my life. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, when I knew the party would be thoroughly destroyed, I finally called my mother. I was parked at a truck stop by then, eating a sandwich, and feeling strangely calm. The kind of calm that comes after you finally stand up for yourself after a lifetime of taking crap. I told her about the property tax payments I'd been making for 3 years, about the water heater, the roof, the dental work. She had no idea. Dad had just told her it was taken care of, without mentioning it was her embarrassing truck driver son keeping a roof over their heads. When Dad got on the phone, he was furious. I pointed out the irony, how it felt to be humiliated in front of people whose opinion you care about. I told him this truck driver had been keeping their lights on and their house from being taken by the county, and asked how it felt to be the embarrassment tonight. He hung up. I finished my sandwich and got back on the road. For the first time in years, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The aftermath was nuclear. Paul broke off the engagement a week later. Apparently his old money parents couldn't handle being associated with a family that couldn't even keep their electricity on during a formal party. Sarah called me a few days after the party fiasco. She'd been in Texas when it all went down, but heard about it through our trucker grapevine. News travels fast when it's juicy enough. So you crashed the system, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. How's the reboot going? Still loading, I replied, but at least the screen's not frozen anymore. She laughed. Sometimes a hard reset is the only way. Just don't forget to install some better programming this time around. It was good advice. I wasn't interested in destroying my family, just forcing them to see me clearly for once. Courtney called me, sobbing, blaming me for ruining her life. She left a voicemail that was mostly unintelligible screeching, but I could make out phrases like selfish jerk and ruined everything between the sobs. I texted back, Dad's pride cost you your relationship. I just stopped cleaning up his messes. I felt bad for Courtney for about 5 minutes. Then I remembered how she never stood up for me, how she joined in on the jokes about my career, how she'd never once called me just to see how I was doing on the road. The sympathy faded pretty quickly after that. Liam, surprisingly, called me a few days later, not to yell, but to ask what the hell happened. We hadn't really talked much in years. He was always too busy with his important lawyer life. He was genuinely shocked to learn I'd been paying their property taxes, the water heater, the roof, and Mom's dental work. They'd never told him things were that bad. I pointed out that, of course, they hadn't. He was the golden child, and they couldn't tarnish that image. When I asked how much he had contributed to keeping them afloat, he admitted he just sent gift cards for Christmas and birthdays. Gift cards, while claiming he couldn't help more because of student loans. The same student loans that somehow didn't prevent him from buying a Land Cruiser or taking ski trips to Aspen. For the next month, I ignored all contact from my family, blocked their numbers, filtered their emails to trash. I needed space to think, to figure out what I wanted. For the first time, I was driving routes without that nagging worry about whether my parents' bills were getting paid. It felt good, freeing. I thought a lot about what family means during those long drives, about obligation versus love, about how sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who see you the least. I watched America roll by my windshield and wondered where I fit in all of it. Miguel checked in on me now and then. He didn't say, "I told you so," about the bitter aftertaste of revenge, but I could tell he was worried. "Family is complicated," he said during one call. "Everyone's trying to live up to something. Their parents' expectations, their own dreams, society's definition of success. Sometimes we're so busy looking up at where we think we should be, we don't see who's holding the ladder. There's something about driving a truck that gives you perspective. You see how temporary everything is, how fragile. You deliver goods to places hit by tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, and you see how quickly what people thought was permanent can be washed away. You drive through towns where the main industry shut down and everyone's just trying to survive. It makes family drama seem small in comparison. The calls and texts eventually stopped. I figured they'd written me off completely, and honestly, I was fine with that. I had friends who respected me, colleagues who valued my work ethic. At truck stops and diners across the country, I had conversations with people who treated me like a human being, not a disappointment. Then, about 6 weeks after the engagement party disaster, my landlord Steve knocked on my door. I was home between hauls, enjoying some rare downtime with Diesel. "There's a couple outside asking for you," he said. "Older folks, say they're your parents." I sighed. "Thanks, Steve." I found them standing awkwardly by their old Buick in the parking lot. They looked smaller somehow. Mom had been crying, her eyes puffy and red. Dad looked defeated. I'd never seen him like that before. His shoulders were slumped, the confident posture gone. He looked his age for the first time I could remember. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not inviting them up. It was a chilly day, and I didn't offer them my jacket or suggest we go inside. Diesel stood by my side, unusually quiet, studying these strangers who smelled like me. "We came to apologize," Mom said quietly. She tried to step toward me, but I didn't move. Dad wouldn't look me in the eye. "We made a mistake." "Which one?" I asked. "Not appreciating that I've been keeping you afloat for years or telling me I'm too embarrassing to invite to family events?" "Both," Mom said, tears welling up. "We had no idea how much you've been helping us. Your father, he never told me." I looked at him. Of course he didn't. Would have ruined the narrative that I'm the family failure. Dad finally looked up. I was wrong. About everything. "Yeah, you were." I crossed my arms. It was strange seeing him like this. The man who had always seemed so strong, so sure of himself, now looking small and afraid. "We're in trouble, Jimmy," Mom said. "Real trouble. The bank, they're threatening foreclosure. We're behind on the mortgage. Not my problem anymore." I started to turn away. "Please," Dad said, and I almost fell over. In 34 years, I'd never heard him say that word to me. "We need help." I let them stew for a minute in the parking lot before I spoke again. "So, let me get this straight. I'm good enough to bail you out, but not good enough to sit at your table? And Liam, what's he contributing to this family emergency?" Mom looked down. "He says his money is all tied up in investments. He can't liquidate right now." I laughed. Not a happy laugh. Of course. The golden child can't be bothered, but the embarrassment with the truck, he's your last hope, right? "We don't have anywhere else to turn," Dad admitted. That must have cost him. He was never one to admit weakness. I thought about all the times they'd made me feel small. All the dinner conversations, where they'd praised my siblings and ignored me. All the backhanded comments about my phase of truck driving that had lasted nearly a decade. The way they dismissed my stories about life on the road while hanging on every word of Liam's boring legal anecdotes. But I also remembered something my grandfather told me before he died. The only family member who ever respected my choices. Being right doesn't always mean being happy, Jimmy. My grandfather had been a factory worker his whole life, never made much money, never had much education. But he was the wisest person I knew. He taught me how to fish, how to change oil, how to look someone in the eye when you shake their hand. Simple stuff that matters more than any degree or job title. I thought about what Miguel said about holding the ladder, what Sarah said about installing better programming after the crash. Maybe this was the chance to redefine what family meant for all of us. "Here's the deal," I said finally. "I'll help you. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm not like you. I don't abandon family, even when they treat me like garbage." Relief washed over their faces. Mom actually started crying again, but I continued. There are conditions. First, I'm not giving you money. I'm buying the house from you. You'll sign it over to me and I'll cover the mortgage. You can live there until you die, but it's mine. Second, I get an apology, a real one, in writing, copied to Liam and Courtney, laying out exactly how you've treated me and exactly how much I've helped you over the years. Third, at the next family gathering, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever, you tell everyone present exactly what happened, how the truck driver's son you were so embarrassed by was the one keeping a roof over your heads. That's humiliating, Dad muttered. Welcome to my world, I shot back. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. They took them. What choice did they have? I called Sarah that night and told her what happened. Look at you, negotiating like a pro, she said. Maybe you should have been the lawyer in the family. Nah, I replied, looking at Diesel snoring on the couch. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. 3 months later, I own my childhood home. The paperwork went through last week. My parents still live there, but the power dynamic has completely shifted. Dad can barely look me in the eye when I visit. Mom keeps trying to make up for lost time by cooking my favorite meals when I'm in town. It's weird being the owner of the house I grew up in, the house where I was made to feel like a failure. Now, I'm the one approving repairs and improvements. I'm the one who decides what color the living room gets painted. There's a certain poetry to it. Miguel came to visit last month, the first time we'd met in person since my system crash, as Sarah calls it. He walked through my childhood home, nodding appreciatively at the place. Good bones, he said, tapping a wall, like you. When he met my parents, they were awkward but polite. Dad tried to make small talk about the trucking industry, asking Miguel questions he'd never bothered to ask me. Your son, Miguel told them, pointing at me, is one of the best drivers I know. Saved my life once. Got more sense and skill than half the fancy degree holders I've met. The look on my dad's face was worth every penny I'd spent on that house. Liam finally pulled his head out of his ass and apologized too. Said he never realized how bad things had gotten. He even offered to help with the mortgage, but I told him it was handled. Sarah was right. The system reboot seemed to be working. Courtney's still barely speaking to me, but she'll come around when she realizes Paul was a douche anyway. For all his family money, he sure was quick to bail when things got tough. Not exactly the kind of guy you want by your side during life's storms. And the best part? Dad actually asked me about my job last week, like, genuinely asked. Wanted to know about routes and schedules, and what it's like living on the road. Small victories, I guess. So that's my story. Was I too harsh? Maybe. But after a lifetime of being the family disappointment, there's something deeply satisfying about being the family savior instead. Life's weird, and then you buy your parents' house.